the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts, now being shown in some 122 communities all over America. Our guest for this broadcast is Brian Darling. Brian has a wealth of experience. He worked for one of the most conservative senators, Bob Smith. He had a lot to do with legislation to arm airline pilots against terrorism. He worked with another dear friend of ours, Mike Harman, perhaps the most brilliant conservative strategist on Capitol Hill, and he's now legislative director for the Heritage Foundation. Tell me what you do as legislative director.
Well, my job is to make sure that the conservative message coming from the Heritage Foundation gets to members of the Senate and gets to members of the House. So I frequently interact with Senate staff, at conservative coalition meetings. Surprisingly, there are still conservatives in Washington, D.C. that work in Capitol Hill. And we meet and talk about strategy and trying to forward the conservative cause.
Do you have a staff of people who report to you?
Yeah, I have a staff of two.
And who decides on what issues you will be lobbying?
Well, we're not allowed to lobby. We educate members of the Senate. That's
because you're a 501c3.
Yeah. So what we do is we'll take the mission of the Heritage Foundation, and you know, we've been working quite a bit in entitlement reform, on keeping taxes low, on health care reform, and with free market-based alternatives to the current system that's creeping towards socialism, having a strong national defense. And there are 10 basic issues that we've been focusing like a laser beam on for a long-term strategy to bring conservative ideas to the Senate and to the House. And we meet with senators. We're meeting with Senate staff and senators tomorrow to talk about entitlement reform. And we meet with staff frequently on an individual one-on-one basis and in big coalition meetings. And we meet on general conservative issues on a weekly basis, and we meet in specific issues on a time to time.
Two issues are at the top of our list at the Conservative Caucus for concern. One is the North American Union, and the other is the UN Law of the Sea Treaty.
Yes.
Do those ever come up in your discussions with people
Yes.
on the Hill?
Yes. On the North American Union, I was in Texas speaking to an organization, the Federation of Texas Republican Women, and the number one issue on their agenda was talking about how we stop the North American Union and the North American Superhighway, and it's something that's on the minds of many people, especially who live in Texas and Oklahoma and the areas that are directly affected. But yeah, we've done a lot.
I do some time on the Hill chatting with senators and representatives, and the level of ignorance and indifference is overwhelming.
It's true.
On that issue.
No, I agree. But our donors to the Heritage Foundation are very in tune, and we do get calls asking, if there's some work that we can do on that issue. On the Law of the Sea Treaty.
Well, let's not leave NAU
Sure.
Yet. Are there any senators or congressmen or staff members who are particularly responsive on that issue?
I'd say there is not a level of understanding of the issue. I think you have these members that just don't understand the issue, and they just don't feel like, your senators, your average House member, senator, they don't care about issues till they're front and center, till they have to confront them with a vote. So many times they gloss over issues that they don't have to deal with till a later date, and they let their staff handle a lot of these issues. So these members are getting a lot of mail on the North American Union, but they're not reacting because they don't have to deal with it now until they're asked to take affirmative action, do something on the issue. So I'd say there's a level, right now we're at the level where people should call their members of Congress and talk with them and educate them about the issue.
We need to get more co-sponsors on Virgil Good's House Concurrent Resolution.
That's right. Yeah, I agree. I think, moving forward on that and in the Senate, I deal primarily with senators, and there really is a low level of understanding of the issue.
I've chatted one-on-one with a number of them, and you're right. They've got other things that are higher on the list. I find that some of the staffers are very well informed. For example, I was chatting not too long ago with the staff and with the Senator, Jeff Sessions of Alabama, and his staff was totally up to speed on the issue.
Yeah.
But he was not excited about getting involved in it. Jim Inhofe, probably the most conservative member of the Senate, very responsive, but he's not prepared to go out front on it. What about the Law of the Sea Treaty? I'm very concerned that John McCain may wind up pushing the Law of the Sea Treaty. I was at a meeting, if he's president, I was at a meeting where he spoke very ambivalently about it. And even the Republican platform has an ambivalent set of words concerning the Law of the Sea Treaty. How's that going? What can be done to firm up opposition to one of the most dangerous treaties ever put forward? It would give the UN control of 70% of the Earth's surface.
Yeah, that's the truth. And the Heritage Foundation has done quite a bit of work on the Law of the Sea Treaty. Ed Meese, former Attorney General under Ronald Reagan, has talked about it. And
he wrote a great piece in the Wall Street Journal.
Wrote a great piece in the Wall Street Journal. We've been using new technologies like YouTube, and Ed Meese has done one to talk about the Law of the Sea Treaty. We had a forum for staff, Senate staff, discussing the Law of the Sea Treaty with Cato and a few other groups and heritage representatives, talking about how this is a danger to American sovereignty. It's just a terrible treaty that, again, I think these members, some of them have been bought off because they really believe the line of the Navy when the Navy says that we need navigation rights.
How do you rebut the fact that the Navy, under pressure from the White House, is backing the Law of the Sea Treaty?
Well,
and that could be a problem with McCain, who's a Navy man.
Right. I mean, I've always asked, and I've had meetings with members of the administration. I've always asked them, what is the Navy prevented from doing right now that this Law of the Sea Treaty would allow them to do? Nothing. There's nothing that our Navy can't do right now. They talk about mining rights and how we really need to have this way to dole out mining rights. But the problem is this International Seabed Authority would have control over mining rights. They'd be taxing American companies, an unprecedented international tax levied by this creation of the Law of the Sea Treaty that would greatly infringe on American sovereignty. And we'd be giving up our rights to navigation on the seas without the consent of this International Seabed Authority, which will be consisting of nations and interests, much like the United Nations, interests that don't care about our sovereignty, interests that want to attack the United States sovereignty. I mean, we're having a discussion right now about the future of the UN. The UN, the President Ahmadinejad of Iran has stated his intent. He wants to come to the United Nations this fall and give a speech on American soil, one of the heads of the Axis of Evil Nations. And we're having a hard time, members of Congress are having a hard time convincing this administration to say, no, you can't come here and give that speech. You want to give that speech, stay home. So if the United Nations has open arms to people like that in countries that hate the United States, why would we create and grant sovereignty and give away our rights to navigation on the seas to another UN light, another organization that will attack our sovereignty?
What are some of the other issues which are at the top of your list?
Well, reforming our tax code. Our tax code is complicated. It's hard to deal with, and we need comprehensive tax reform that will have a flat tax and lower tax rates for all Americans. There's been a lot of discussion right now, right front and center is this housing crisis and the fact that the federal government is bailing out all of these companies like Freddie Mac, like Fannie Mae. There's talk about...
Why is there no effort by the Republicans to hold Chris Dodd and Barney Frank accountable for their oversight as chairman of the Senate and House banking committees, their oversight of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae?
Yeah.
I mean, when Enron was an issue, Katie barred the door.
Yeah, it's true.
But these guys are getting a free ride.
And the Senate and the House went in the wrong direction. They granted more authority to the federal government to do bad things and to infuse our tax dollars, maybe $200 billion, into these companies to keep them afloat when they're failing. You look at somebody like Jim Bunning. He's a hero in this issue, great senator from Kentucky. He's been great in this issue. He's been calling
a great pitcher, too.
Yeah, great athlete, a Hall of Famer. And he's called for the resignation of Secretary Paulson. He's been very critical of this administration.
Paulson is Red China's man in the Bush cabinet.
Yeah. And many say that this reason why this bailout happened was because international interest pressured the United States to bail them out for investing money in these companies, these public-private companies. So I think anybody that cares about sovereignty should be deeply concerned about the fact that foreign nations are telling us that we should be bailing them out with American tax dollars, with our tax dollars.
We're going to have to take a break, but when we come back, I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the energy issues being confronted on Capitol Hill and which will face the next administration, whoever is the president. Please stay with us. We'll be back right after these messages.
Hi, I'm Congressman Tom Tancredo. You know, I just returned from a hearing on the southern border in a place called Brownsville, Texas. One of the participants in the hearing told us that for them, a border really doesn't exist between the United States and Mexico. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people have that attitude, that there are no such things as borders, that they really don't matter, that they're just lines on a map and nobody should pay attention to them, and that we're all just residents of the North American continent. Well, you know what? That's baloney. It's baloney, but only if you will do something about it to prove to the people of this country, and especially to your elected officials, that you know borders matter, that you know the sovereignty of this country is at risk, and that you will take action to make sure that they understand it. That action is best taken by calling your local talk radio stations, writing letters to the editor, and of course, letting members of Congress know that you know. That's the best thing. They're hoping, as a matter of fact, that no one really picks up on this issue of a North American trade association that essentially eliminates borders. But the fact is it's happening. You can see parts of it all of the time. So it's something that we need to stop. America, and I mean the United States of America, not the continent, but the United States of America is at stake. Do your part.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips. Our guest is Brian Darling, Director of Legislative Affairs for the Heritage Foundation. And Brian works on Capitol Hill, educating members of the House and Senate on issues of concern to the Heritage Foundation. And why don't you review once again what those issues are?
Yeah, I mean, the Heritage Foundation works on keeping our national defenses strong, promoting traditional values, and promoting pro-growth policies, good economic policies like keeping taxes low, lowering regulations to allow our economy to expand.
And one of the issues that has come up during this presidential campaign has been the future of Social Security. President George W. Bush early on came up with a proposal, and it was instantly shot down, and we never heard anything more from it. McCain troubled a great many people, including Grover Norquist, for suggesting that he might raise taxes or raise the Social Security deductions from people's paychecks. I don't know if that is his real intention, but that would be very troubling, especially now that as a result of policies of President Reagan and President Clinton, taxpayers have to cough up on their income tax return money from their earnings to reduce the value of their Social Security benefits. At the Conservative Caucus, we call it a triple tax. Yeah. They paid the Social Security tax when they were working. Their employer paid the Social Security tax, and now they're being called on to pay it again. It's an outrage. And do you have any thoughts about what is likely to happen?
Yes, it's something we've been doing a lot of work on. You look at the exploding cost of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and they're chewing up larger portions of the budget every year. One thing that we've been actually working on with more left-leaning think tanks is to talk about the problem. The problem is that all these government programs are out of control. They're chewing up more of the budget every year, and something needs to be done to control the costs, the waste, fraud, and abuse, and just the exploding cost of these programs and the waste that's going on. So one of the things we've talked about is the possibility of changing the budget rules that the federal government uses to put these entitlement programs, which are on autopilot, under the budget, so that every few years, maybe every 5 years, the House and the Senate have to sit down and review how much the projected costs are for these plans and pay for them and figure out to make sure that where to cut other programs. Now, the diversion comes between right and left and how you do that. Obviously, the left would like to raise taxes and solve it all through taking more money from the taxpayers, and conservatives don't want that to happen. They want waste, fraud, and abuse weeded out. They want more of a free market system on health care, so it's not all free money coming from the government for Medicare and Medicaid, and where we have an actual system where it matters what you pay into the system.
In 1961, I was a junior at Harvard, and I testified before the House Ways and Means Committee, chaired by Wilbur Mills, against Kerr Mills and King Anderson, each of which led to Medicare and Medicaid. And I think back, and what would the world be like if under LBJ the Medicare program had not been established? How much suffering would there be, in your opinion?
I think the situation today would be, if those weren't ever created, I'm sure that before they were created, we had a situation where people were being taken care of privately. People were giving up their own money. We have a moral hazard.
And we had doctors
Yeah.
who would not turn people
Exactly.
away.
Exactly.
And they did not have to spend a fortune on the bureaucratization of health care.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you go, even if you have a pretty good health care system, you go into the doctor's office, immediately you're not dealing with a free market system. You're waiting for care because these doctors take in patients who are getting government money for Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs. Your costs are all inflated. When you look at the cost of the services you're paying for, they're inflated by this massive amount of government money that's infused into the system, and it's destroying the system.
I know several doctors, and by the way, my wife's dad was a physician. And I know several doctors who say, we will not take any Medicare or Medicaid patients. I will not turn anyone away. Pay what you can afford. If you can't afford anything, I'll treat you anyway. Yeah. But I am not going to be trapped in this system.
Well, look at the running joke is, if the United States were to move to socialized medicine, where would Canadians go for health care? Right. You have the Canadians right now where they have a socialized system, but they're kind of opting out of it, and they're having, for really critical needs, for critical care, they have individuals that are paying for services in Canada, so they're moving away from it. Why would we as a country move towards it?
I have a friend, he was on the original board of Young Americans for Freedom. He now lives in London. He had some serious health problems, and he sent me a long letter explaining how on several occasions he was almost killed by socialized medicine. Mm-hmm. We praised Maggie Thatcher, but she wound up supporting socialized medicine in Britain, even as she was opposing SDI and bringing Robert Mugabe to power in Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia. But that is a big challenge. We have got to figure out a way to prevent our federal government from becoming bankrupt through Medicaid and Medicare. We're now looking at a $52 trillion debt down the road as a result of these things.
And that's being passed on to future generations. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. I mean, look at this current controversy over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Somebody's bailing them out because they made poor decisions and the company just imploded on itself, but it's still being propped up by our tax dollars.
Well, the way it's going to be paid for is by the Fed inflating the currency, diminishing the value of earnings and savings, and impoverishing the American people with funny money.
Right.
And that's how it's going to be paid for, by cheapening the value of the dollar. And so a good reason to buy gold and silver.
And we talk about the big debate now over energy prices. Well, one of the reasons is because the federal government has devalued the dollar. It's made it very expensive to buy foreign oil. And that's one of the major reasons why we have gas prices going through the roof, because the federal government has purposely devalued the dollar to make our exports more affordable to foreigners.
The weak dollar is responsible for the high cost of gasoline at the pump.
That's absolutely right.
I recently attended Ron Paul's Rally for the Republic in Minneapolis during the Republican convention. And the amazing thing was that whenever someone criticized the Federal Reserve, there were huge chants and cheers, end the Fed, end the Fed. Now, it's amazing. This has not been an issue in the public discourse since the 1920s. The Fed was created in 1913. Andrew Jackson was a very popular president, one of my heroes, because he fought Mr. Biddle's Bank, which was a precursor to the Fed. And I think at some point this is going to become a dominant issue in a presidential campaign. Not this year, but it will again be an issue when people wake up to the fact that the Fed is guilty of highway robbery. The Fed, every day Mr. Bernanke and his colleagues meet, they're stealing our money.
It's true. It's true. And you look at what Ron Paul did in his campaign, educating the American people about what goes on at the Fed. I mean, people don't understand what the Fed does. And to understand that they purposely change interest rates, and it harms people. It harms, it devalues the dollar. What they've been doing over the past few years is purposely devaluing the dollar, and that hurts the average American who has savings. And it's really harming people. And Ron Paul, he brought, I think that's one of the most important messages he brought to the American people in his campaign.
You know, it's amazing how many young people have been attracted to Ron Paul's message. I was at his event at the Target Arena in Minneapolis, and there were more than 10,000 people who paid $17.75 apiece, and the average age had to be in the 20s or at the most in the early 30s. He is providing a new generation of leadership. And the question is whether the Ron Paulites or the Sarah Palinates will be the future of conservatism, of the Republican Party, or of something outside the Republican Party in general. Well, we have just about a minute left before we go to break. How did you get to the Heritage Foundation? Who recruited you?
I worked, actually, when I worked on Capitol Hill, working for Senator Bob Smith from New Hampshire, Senator Paul Coverdell from Georgia, and others, I interacted frequently and used the resources of the Heritage Foundation. So it was kind of a natural place to go, and I met some great people over there, like Ed Fulner, the president, and I ended up luckily landing there.
Well, I knew Ed Fulner before he was Ed Fulner, many years ago when he worked for Congressman Phil Crane of Illinois. Please stay with us. And when we come back, we're going to give Brian Darling a chance to let you know how you can interact with the Heritage Foundation and become, on a regular basis, conversant with the work they do and that he does at Capitol Hill. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. The very first clause in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, immediately following the preamble, asserts that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. All legislative powers, that means you cannot give other entities the power to legislate, not the United Nations or the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or the federal judiciary or regulatory agencies or federally funded private organizations. If you're going to stick to the Constitution, only the Congress can make policy, and the Conservative Caucus works to assure that Congress will more nearly conform to the Constitution.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org, 703-938-9626.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, I hope you will check out our website, which is www.conservativeusa.org. One of our top issues is our opposition to the North American Union, and we have a war room. It's called nauwarroom.org. You can check that out as well. In addition, I hope that you will accept free publications that we'll be delighted to send you. But what you have to do is send us your name and address. You can fax it to us at 703-281-4108, or you can drop your contact information in the mail to us at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. Brian, how do we stay in touch with you and the Heritage Foundation?
Yeah, on the internet, it's at www.heritage.org, and phone number is 202-546-4400, and anybody can give us a call if they want to chat. I also write a column for Human Events, and it can be read every week in the Human Events hard copy, and it's online at the Human Events website, www.humanevents.com.
Brian, there are 100 members of the U.S. Senate. There are 435 members of the U.S. House, and there are only 3 of you. There's Brian Darling and 2 aides, and I haven't even mentioned the thousands of staff people from the House and Senate committees. How can 3 people handle the very important educational task over which you preside?
Well, the Heritage Foundation has about 200 employees, just over 200 now, so we have a lot of people pitching in and helping out, doing different things.
And you take no government money to pay their salaries.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we would never take government money.
And how do you get your money?
Donors. We have a lot of individuals that give money to the Heritage Foundation. Many think tanks take a lot of corporate money. We take a little bit, but not very much. It's mostly individuals that will just write a check to the Heritage Foundation because they agree with our mission.
How many people are on your mailing list?
Oh, I don't know, actually, off the top of my head, but I'd say it's in the at least probably about 300 to 350,000, I would say.
That's wonderful. Well, you've had, while still a young man, a distinguished career working for a terrific U.S. Senator Bob Smith,
yes,
working for my friend Mike Hammond, and now for the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for spending this time with us. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And I'll read your column every week faithfully.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Conservative Roundtable. Watch us again next time.